My dearest friends, if you've ever sat at a holiday table and felt the air suddenly turn cold even though the fire was roaring, then you'll know exactly the ache I'm about to share with you tonight. It was Christmas Eve, 2018, in a little red brick house on Maple Crescent in London, Ontario, a quiet street where the snow piles high and the porch lights glow soft gold against the dark. I was 62 years old that winter, and I thought I had already lived through every kind of heartache a woman can carry. But nothing prepared me for what my younger sister, Caroline, said that night while the turkey was still steaming on the platter. I'm Margaret Thompson, though most folks around here just call me Margie. I've spent 44 years of my life in this same small city, raising 3 children, burying a husband far too young, and looking after our father ever since Mother passed in 2009. Dad, Harold Thompson, was 87 that Christmas, frail as a winter sparrow, his hands trembling so badly he could barely butter his bread anymore. Parkinson's had stolen the strength from him bit by bit, but it never touched his smile. That man could still light up a room with one crooked grin. We'd gathered like we always did, Dad at the head of the table in his old wooden wheelchair we draped with a red plaid blanket, me beside him so I could cut his meat, my daughter Emily and her husband, my son Daniel home from Calgary, and then Caroline, 57, twice divorced, always dressed like she was heading to a photo shoot instead of a family dinner. She'd driven in from Toronto that afternoon in her shiny silver SUV, carrying designer bags instead of groceries, kissing the air beside everyone's cheeks. The candles were flickering. The grandchildren were laughing in the living room over a game of cards. Bing Crosby crooned softly from the old stereo. Everything felt safe, familiar. The way Christmas is supposed to feel when you're past 60 and just grateful everyone is under one roof. Then Caroline stood up to make a toast. She held her crystal wine glass high, the one she'd brought herself because she said ours were dated. Her lipstick was perfect, her blonde hair swept up like she was still the prom queen of 1979. And she smiled that dazzling smile that always got her whatever she wanted. "I have the most wonderful news," she announced, voice ringing like bells. "Daddy and I have been talking for months now, and he's decided to simplify everything. After Christmas, he's transferring his entire savings, every penny, into an account in my name so I can manage everything for him." "Isn't that right, Daddy?" The room went still. Dad's fork hovered halfway to his mouth. A slice of turkey slid off and landed with a soft plop on his plate. His eyes, those pale blue eyes that used to twinkle when he read us bedtime stories, filled with something I couldn't name. Confusion. Fear. Shame, maybe. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out except the smallest sound, like a sigh that had nowhere left to go. I felt my heart crack clean in two, because I knew Dad had never said any such thing. For the last 10 years, I had been the one driving him to every doctor's appointment, sleeping on the couch when the nights got bad, counting out his pills at dawn, washing his pajamas when the tremors made a mess. I was the one who found the statements in his desk drawer, the ones that showed almost $400,000 tucked away, money he and Mom had scraped together from 50 years of teaching school and never taking fancy vacations. Money he always said would be split evenly between Caroline and me when he was gone, so neither of us would ever have to worry in old age. Caroline lived 3 hours away in a condo full of marble counters. She visited maybe 3 times a year, always with excuses about how busy she was building her brand as an interior decorator to the rich and famous. She sent Dad birthday cards with $20 bills inside and thought that was love. And now this. I looked at Dad. His chin trembled. A single tear slid down the crease beside his nose and dropped onto the tablecloth Mom had embroidered back in 1983. "Caroline," I said, trying to keep my voice steady for the children's sake, "this isn't the time." "Oh, Margie, don't be dramatic," she laughed, waving a manicured hand. "Daddy and I have it all sorted. He's getting forgetful. He needs someone sharp looking after things. You're so busy with everything here." She gestured around my modest dining room as if it were a burden. Emily's eyes went wide. Daniel put a protective arm around his wife. The grandchildren sensed the storm and went quiet. Dad finally found his voice. It came out small and cracked, the way it did when the medicine was wearing off. I never said, all of it, Caroline. I said, maybe, some help with bills. Caroline's smile froze for just a second, then widened again, brighter, crueler. Daddy, we talked about this. You signed the papers last month when I took you to the bank. Don't you remember? It's for your own good. I felt the blood leave my face, because I remembered that day perfectly. Caroline had insisted on taking Dad for a nice drive and lunch. I'd been uneasy, but he wanted to go. When they came home, he was exhausted, confused, said they'd just had soup and looked at old photo albums at her place. He never mentioned the bank. I'd found a plain white envelope in his coat pocket 2 days later with new account papers, but when I asked him about it, he looked blank and changed the subject. She'd taken him alone. She'd sat beside a man whose hands shook too hard to hold a pen steady and convinced him, or confused him, into signing his life away. I stood up so fast my chair scraped across the floor. Caroline Thompson, you will not do this. Not on Christmas Eve. Not in front of his grandchildren. She turned to me, eyes glittering. Stay out of it, Margie. You've had him all to yourself for years. Some of us have lives. The words hit me like a slap. All to myself? The nights I cried into my pillow because I was bone-tired? The savings I'd drained paying for his medications before the insurance finally kicked in? The birthdays I spent alone with him because she was always just too swamped? Dad's head dropped. His shoulders folded inward like a child being scolded. And that was the moment something inside me shattered for good. I knelt beside his wheelchair and took his cold, trembling hand in mine. Daddy, I whispered, look at me. He lifted his eyes. In them I saw the strong man who once carried me on his shoulders through the county fair, the man who worked 2 jobs so we could have piano lessons, the man who held my hand at Mom's graveside and promised he'd never leave me alone. I'm here, I told him. I've always been here, and I'm not going anywhere. Caroline scoffed and started gathering her coat. Call me when everyone calms down, she said to the room, as if we were the ones hysterical. Daddy, I'll pick you up next week to finish the paperwork. The front door slammed behind her. Snow blew in and melted on the rug. For a long time, nobody spoke. Then Dad's voice, barely audible. Margie, I didn't mean. I got mixed up. I was afraid to say no. I pressed his hand to my cheek and felt the tears rolling hot down my own face. It's all right, Daddy. We'll fix it. I promise you we'll fix it. That night, after the children cleared the table and Dad was tucked into bed with an extra blanket because shock makes a body cold, I sat at the kitchen table with Emily and Daniel and a pot of tea gone cold. We spread out every bank statement, every scribbled note, every Christmas card with Caroline's perfect handwriting. And that's when we found it, the power of attorney form dated November 14th. The one that gave her complete control over everything the moment Dad became incapacitated. Her signature bold and flowing. Dad's name a shaky scrawl that wandered off the line. I cried then the way I hadn't cried since Mom died. Quiet, shoulder-shaking sobs that come from a place so deep you didn't know it still existed. But tears don't fix legal papers. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. January bit hard that year. The wind howled down from Lake Huron and rattled the windows. Dad stopped eating much. He'd sit in his chair staring at the bird feeder, apologizing over and over in this tiny voice. I let you down, Margie. I let your mother down. Every day I phoned lawyers, most of whom gently explained that undoing this would be expensive and painful and might drag Dad through depositions he was too fragile to survive. Caroline refused to take my calls. She sent one email. Stop being selfish. He wanted this. In February, the bank froze the main account after I filed an emergency motion claiming elder financial abuse. Caroline screamed down the phone when she finally rang back, words I won't repeat because they still burn my ears. She threatened to have Dad declared incompetent and moved to a home near her so Margie can finally have a life. I thought my heart would stop. But something rose up in me then, something fierce and mama bear strong I didn't know I still had at 62. I phoned every friend from the church, every neighbor on Maple Crescent, even Dad's old teaching colleagues. I gathered statements from the doctor about his confusion that day at the bank, from the teller who remembered Caroline guiding his hand to sign. In March, we went to court. I'll never forget walking into that courthouse in my Sunday coat, Dad beside me in the wheelchair, snow melting off our boots. Caroline sat on the other side in a tailored suit, face like stone. The judge was a kind-eyed woman about my age who listened for 2 solid days while we laid out every piece of a lifetime. Dad testified. His voice shook worse than ever, but he looked straight at the judge and said, "I love both my girls. I never wanted one to have everything and the other nothing. I got scared and I got confused, and I'm ashamed I let it happen." When he said that, Caroline's mask slipped for the first time. I saw something flicker across her face, regret, maybe, or just the shock of hearing her father sound so broken. The judge ruled in our favor. The power of attorney was voided. The money was ordered returned to an account requiring both sisters' signatures. Caroline was made to pay the legal fees. Afterward, in the corridor, she walked past me without a word. I thought that was the end of us. But grace works in slow, strange ways. In April, the forsythia bloomed yellow along the back fence, same as it had every spring of my childhood. Dad started eating again. His tremors were still there, but the light came back into his eyes when the grandchildren visited. One Saturday, the doorbell rang. There stood Caroline, no makeup, hair pulled back, holding a casserole like we were still little girls, bringing supper to a sick neighbor. She didn't say much at first. Just, "Can I come in?" We sat at the same kitchen table where everything had exploded 5 months earlier. Dad reached for her hand with his trembling one, and she let him take it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And then the tears came, hers, mine, Dad's. We cried until there was nothing left but the sound of the kettle beginning to sing. She never moved back home. Some wounds are too deep for that. But she started driving in every second Sunday. She learned how to crush Dad's pills and mix them into applesauce. She sat with him while I took my first afternoon nap in years. And when Dad finally slipped away peacefully in his sleep the following December, just shy of 90, he left a new will, written with a lawyer both of us trusted, splitting everything down the middle, right to the penny. At the funeral, Caroline and I stood side by side at the graveside, arms linked the way we used to when we were small and the world felt safe. Snow was falling again, soft and silent, covering the ground like forgiveness. Later, back at the house, we opened the Christmas crackers Mom always loved. The paper crowns were crooked on our gray heads, and we laughed through our tears when the terrible jokes inside were the same ones from 50 years ago. Caroline raised her teacup, plain china this time, not crystal, and said quietly to Dad, "And to second chances." I clinked my cup against hers. "To family," I answered. "The one we're born with, and the one we choose when we're wise enough to know better." And that, my dear friends, is the Christmas I thought would break me, but instead taught me the hardest and truest lesson of my 66 years. Love is messy and imperfect, and sometimes it shouts ugly words across a holiday table. But if you hold on long enough, if you refuse to let go of even the thinnest thread, grace has a way of knitting it whole again. Dad's savings bought me a little condo nearer my grandchildren, and it bought Caroline the chance to remember who she used to be before life made her hard. We're not close the way we once dreamed we'd be, but we're sisters. And some Christmas Eves now, when the snow falls soft on Maple Crescent, she drives in with a casserole, and we sit by the fire and talk about Dad until the stars come out. That's enough. More than enough. Thank you for sitting with me while I told you this story. If you're watching this on a quiet evening, maybe with a cup of tea cooling beside you, I hope it reminds you that no night is too dark for morning to find its way in. God bless you, everyone. And Merry Christmas, truly, deeply, from the bottom of a heart that learned how to mend.